Hello, I'm Chip Pickering. I'm the CEO of INCOMPAS. And as we get started today, I couldn't be happier to be on a webinar with a good friend, a great ally, and a champion for competition in broadband, and has really been, for most of our audience, a longtime leader on the Hill, worked for Senator Markey, now is at the Treasury Department leading the office that is responsible for the Capital Projects Fund, critical infrastructure, broadband for our nation, is overseeing about $10 billion. Joey, I don't know if you ever thought that you would have a pot of gold to be able to close the digital divide, advance the things that you care about the most in the administration, and your friends and allies and leaders on the Hill have been working toward for so many years. But today we get to talk about all of those things. INCOMPAS, as our audience knows, we are the founding voice of competition going back 40 years. And now we're the leading voice for broadband competition. And as we went through the infrastructure bill that just recently passed through Congress, signed by President Biden, now being designed for the implementation and the execution of it as it goes from the Commerce Department to the states. What you're working on really is the precedent setter. As we look at, okay, what are the priorities? What are the parameters? What are the guiding principles, as well as the guidance of what kind of network needs to be built, and how do we promote the very core consumer objectives of lower prices, faster speeds, more choice, more competition, and really laying the foundation for the economy of the future, the workforce of the future, hopefully connecting the anchor institutions that are critical to every community. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you today with our members, those that are joining us, to learn about where you are in the process. What's the next step? What's the status? Before we get started, though, I would love to ask a personal question. So you've gone from the first branch of government, as we would like to say, to the second branch, to the executive branch. How's the transition? How are you enjoying it? And what are you learning and seeing?
First, Chip, thanks for having me, and thanks to all of INCOMPAS for all that you're doing to promote competition and broadband build out around the country. You know, it's a funny transition, right? I was on the Hill for 13 years. I became a creature of the Hill, a Hill rat, as they say, for those staffers who were up there for so long. And it was hard to walk away. It was very hard to walk away from Ed Markey, who I know you know so well. He was such a terrific boss. But what makes it easy to go over to the executive branch, indeed, is the B at the front of billion, right? I have $10 billion at the Treasury Department to make an incredible impact. You know, I've heard you say many times, this is an historic moment, like the 96 Act. Yeah. And to be in the executive branch right now at a time when we're deploying our money, when Commerce is gearing up to deploy their money, to finish the job, to complete the networks, to close the digital divide and bring affordable, reliable internet to all, is where else would you want to be right now?
Well, it is a historic moment, and I would love for you to kind of give the listeners today, the audience, the latest status. Where are you in the process? Where are you with the fund? When is it, and is it already going into effect, getting the funds out the door? Just kind of give an outline for everyone that's listening, where you are in the process and what you expect in the next 4 weeks to the next 6 months.
Excellent. So we are officially open for business. We are accepting plans from all states and DC and territories on how they want to spend their money. Now, every state knows already what their allocation is. Those numbers were set back in the fall. They range anywhere from the low 100 millions to just over 500 million for California. And so what states have to do is come in and give us the plan. This is how we intend to use the money. Now, a number of states have already applied. The deadline is September for application, but I like to say it's a rolling basis. It's like college admissions. So your states are not waiting on Washington. Washington is waiting on the states to apply. Now, I already told you a number of states have applied, and we have gone through, and I will go more into this a little later, we've gone into an iterative process with those states, and we are nearing the point of award for some of those early states. You said 4 weeks. I don't want to put an exact number on it, but it should be measured in weeks, not months, in terms of making these first awards. And that's hundreds of millions of dollars of broadband deployment. And we'd like to see awards throughout the rest of the spring, summer, and into the fall. Because ultimately, this is American Rescue Plan money. This is COVID relief money. The intent was to put the money on the street as soon as possible and bring connectivity to all corners of the country. So it is a very exciting time right now for us.
In that context, what are your biggest challenges? And what would be the hardest part of the review process? Any insight that you can give the audience of things
Sure.
that they can do working with their respective states where they do business and serve customers and want to compete for these awards? What would your advice be?
Sure. It's a good question. So I'll answer what are the biggest challenges now, and I'll tell you what I think the biggest challenge will be in the future. The biggest challenge now, well, for the most part, I'll say the early states that have applied tend to be the eager beavers, right? They're the ones who had the plan ready to go, saw this coming, have been ready, anticipating this moment, and were early to apply. And frankly, most of their applications were pretty good to start because they're accelerated and they're already sophisticated. Though we keep telling people, make sure you're reading our rules, reading our guidelines, right? Our build standards 100 symmetrical. All providers have to participate in the ACP, in the affordability program at the FCC, right? These are not optional. These are the standards. These are the requirements. If you follow our rules, it can be an easy process. I think the bigger obstacle or the bigger question is yet to be known. I've told you, I can't say exactly how many, but a number of states, about as many as you can count on 2 fingers, have applied. Well, that leaves the majority that have not. And so it's unclear what states that will apply in the summer, in the spring and the summer. And I think the thing you fear the most is states that are just not prepared and what they apply in the fall. But the hope is that with all the attention that's being played to broadband, all of the resources that are out there, including all the work that INCOMPAS has done, our hope is that we're going to educate people, we're going to educate states and broadband offices, we're going to help them, and hopefully that all 50 states submit strong, good applications that bring connectivity. So that's our hope. That's our goal.
For everyone listening, why what Joey is doing and the Treasury Department and the administration is doing with this fund is so critically, strategically important is I want to put it in the context of what is to come next.
Right.
So NTIA has a little over $42 billion that will be going to the states for broadband deployment. But they have to wait for the FCC to complete their maps. So what Treasury is doing with the Capital Projects Fund, they're actually kind of filling with $10 billion, kind of the first phase, the first principles. We could say the founding principles of broadband deployment and connectivity that the other agencies and states will follow. Mm-hmm. We hope that you set the model, you set the blueprint, and you learn in your process, and then hopefully as the first 10 states who are kind of the early adapters that you talk about, the first movers, that everyone else catches up and learns from what you're doing. And so this is a very important process that you're now leading. And if you don't mind, who are those first so our member companies and our audience, who are some of the states that are in the lead? And I say this so that people will know where they need to go first. And second, I want to induce competition among the states. I want my state, my home state, to say, look, if 10 states are out there ahead of us now, we need to catch up. We need to compete for it. We need to, get our plan ready. And so I want the states to compete as well as all the broadband companies to be competing for these funds. So who are those first 10 states that are kind of the first movers?
So I can't tell you, but you could read between the lines and you could be listening to, other state broadband leaders talk. And I think it's pretty evident, who those in the lead are. I would say there's really two dynamics here that are at play here about the need to get this money out there that I think you're feeling from your home state and from all states, right? One is that people are unconnected, right? It's that clearly, COVID has shown that without a high-speed internet connection, you cannot effectively function in modern society. I mean, this wouldn't be possible, right? I'm sitting in suburban DC right now in my office in my house, talking to an untold number of people on a webinar. I can't even see them. So clearly, broadband is so essential. But there are also, I think you're right. I mean, there's obviously a political dimension here of this money is available. As someone said, I think this was at the SBLN conference that NTIA put on last month that we spoke at, was this is an opportunity for states to put wins on the board, for governors to put wins on the board and use our money and connect tens of thousands of people now, put shovels in the ground now, and then start this momentum as we move towards NTIA. I think of it as waves on the beach in many ways, right? We're like the first wave. It's a big wave, and then NTA is coming with an even bigger wave. Yeah. But it's good to sort of space them out and put our money to use, because this other money is coming in. I mean, I don't work at NTA, I work at Treasury, but we all know that money is not going to be available in the very near term because of the steps and the challenges that have to go between now and use of their funds.
It's good to be the first mover, isn't it?
Always, yeah. Always good to go first.
So talk about how you're coordinating with the states, the state broadband offices, and how important that is. And anything that, again, for those listening, how can you encourage your state broadband office to work with what Joey is doing at Treasury? And then talk a little bit, if you had the model application from a state, what would that look like? What are the things that, what are the objectives, the criteria, and the elements of what you think would be a great application?
Right. So your first question is, how do we work with the states? Well, there's a person on my staff who is the point of contact for every single state, in the sense of our team has split up the states. So every state knows exactly who on our team to go to. And we check in with every state every week. And so we have built over months and months, I think, an extremely strong relationship with all the state broadband offices around the country to walk them through how to apply, what the parameters are, what the requirements are, and answer whatever questions they have, which range from your second question of what's a model application to more specific, how does the Cash Management Improvement Act work, and the Paperwork Reduction Act, which is, Chip, I have to say, it is an education that I'm going through as well, standing up a multi-billion-dollar grants program. There are all sorts of laws and acronyms that I never knew about until now. but are very important as you're ensuring that the money is effectively spent. When you're talking about, so the second question is what is a model application? I mean, a model application would follow our guidance, right? It's 100 symmetrical. We're encouraging fiber. We have put our thumb on the scale for fiber because we want future-proof technologies. We don't want to have to trench in 3 or 5 years. We want the technology to be able to keep up with the demand over the next however many decades. We want to make sure that affordability is an important part or a key part of the program. And that includes participation in the ACP at the FCC. And finally, we want it to be a competitive process. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, we could talk more philosophically about why did Congress think that they had to give us $10 billion to spend on capital expenditures for broadband? Or why did they give the NTA $42 billion? Well, I mean, you and I both know it's because there's been a market failure in a lot of places. There's been, and in many places, incumbents or providers in general have decided not to build out service, or the service has not kept up in the sense of it's not fast and it's not reliable. And so our money is intended to spur the deployment in those areas. And so we find it essential that states should not limit the number of, or the types, I should say, both number and types of providers that can bid. We should be open-minded about all types of providers, because again, if it was just left to the market, which it had been up until now, you could see how it is a very inequitable build out of broadband service around our country. And we're trying to correct for that.
I think for everyone listening, is music to their ears. One, that you're trying to do something that I think corrects failures of the past.
Yep.
And gives a much higher probability of success for the future.
Yeah.
And that is, for too long and in too many ways, our subsidy programs, USF and others, have subsidized the networks of the past, the speeds and service of the past, the copper and coaxial, the asymmetrical and the low speed and the low capacity networks that no longer meet the needs of the present, nor can ever meet the needs of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road.
Right.
And so only fiber can do that. Now, let me make a quick note. We have members that are satellite, that are wireless, that are fixed, and that are fiber. And we think that for all of those technologies, that they have to be part of the solution. But fiber is their foundation. It is the foundation and the framework of the communication capabilities and technology capabilities of everything in the future. And really, wireless is fiber now. And fiber is wireless because a small cell network, or the small tower, the micro tower versus the old network design, is getting into fiber as fast as you can. So you have to extend fiber, you have to densify fiber, you have to enrich fiber for every technology from satellite to wireless to fixed, to direct fiber to the home and business. And so one, we want to really commend you for the foresight of making the parameters and the guidance something that really will scale over time and meet the objective, I think, that Congress had, which is to make it future-proof.
Exactly.
So we're thank you for the leadership. Two, your comments on making it a competitive process. You know, some states and you know, it's a state-by-state battle.
Yes, it is.
Just like it is in Washington, to try to overcome the forces of incumbency that understandably want to limit competition, to limit the ability for everyone to compete for these funds. You know, politicians would like no one to ever run against them if they could make the rules such. But we depend in democracy and in markets on free market competition and as many new entrants and new technologies and new ideas as possible. So for your leadership, both on future-proofing the networks and on trying to push the states to have wide open, as your old boss, Senator Markey, would say, Darwinian, ruthless, never-ending, disruptive competition. And so we're
paranoia and Darwinian paranoia inducing competition. Not that I heard that phrase that many times in my 10 years.
So thank you for that. Talk a little bit about how can you best incentivize states to adopt those as you award your grants, both on the speeds and the symmetrical and on the competitive side? Sure.
I mean, on the competitive side, a state should want to stretch their dollars as far as they can. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's in some states, as you know, some states are going to struggle to even reach 100% connectivity, particularly large Western states and plain states. Yeah. But even for those states in the East that are closer to 100% connectivity, it's not just necessarily about bringing access to all. There are affordability issues, there's digital literacy issues, there's devices, there's everything else. And so I think a state should always be looking to stretch their dollars and to bring down the cost of bringing fiber to each home. I think that just is good governance, good government, and good economics.
Yes. Well, and I assume that everyone is on board with the 100 symmetrical, and so that may not be as difficult of getting the buy-in, although it wasn't easy getting there. And people need to be reminded the broadband definition used to be 25 by 3. So the 100 by 100 is a great progress that was not easy to get adopted because, again, incumbents wanted to protect the old technologies and they wanted to limit competition. And so the 100 by 100 is forcing new builds by anyone who receives, whether that's incumbent or competitor. But talk a little bit about, how do we get, I know the states should have the incentive to adopt a competitive framework and a competitive bid process. But is there anything in the award process that you can do to further reward that or encourage it?
Sure. The program was designed to give a lot of flexibility to states, right? The pendulum has swung in the sense of this is not a competitive grant program where Mississippi or a provider in Mississippi is competing against a provider in Massachusetts, right? Yeah. Each state knows what they're going to get. And the state has to follow, the rules that we prescribe. Now they have to follow 100 symmetrical. We've talked about that many times. But within each state, there's a benefit and a cost of saying, well, you can kind of tailor it to your own needs, right? A state like Rhode Island is different than Maine, has different needs than Mississippi, has different needs than Montana. That's a good thing in one sense, that Congress is saying one size doesn't fit all. But in the other sense, it can lead to potentially, I think we're dancing around to potentially negative outcomes or less than optimal outcomes or efforts in certain states about how they build their process or about potentially state bills that can have the intended or not, consequence of frustrating, yes, what we want. I think it is important I think it is always important, I will always say to your members, it is essential that they be talking to their broadband offices, their state broadband offices. I think it's also important that they talk to their state legislatures, right? You and I are creatures of the legislature.
Yes.
It's important to be talking to them. They wield influence, and to be reminding them of, don't just listen to we'll say a certain powerful set of companies, right? That you should be thinking about all companies and how we get to the most efficient and best results with these funds.
Yeah, this is, and I do want all of our member companies and everyone listening to take some sense of ownership of what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is that Congress made a huge paradigm shift away from a Washington-driven model run from the FCC to say that whether it was in ARPA and the fund that you're administering or what NTIA is doing, they wanted to go to a state approach that would be more flexible and more similar to what we have done with our highway infrastructure system.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Where the funding comes from the federal, but the states administer and oversee and actually execute it. So this is a huge shift in public policy. And so for member companies who are operating in whether it's Maine to Mississippi or Montana or Massachusetts, get all the alliteration.
Exactly.
But all the, going and talking to your state broadband office, talking to your state legislative leaders. The reality is that states who adopt competitive processes and see new competition in our market, they get higher speed, better service, lower prices, more innovation, and it multiplies. And the data could not be more clear or obvious of the benefits of competition. But you need to now go advocate. Washington has made a decision to send it to the states and localities. Now it's up to our companies that are operating closest to those state leaders to now make the case for competition and for the capacity and the future proofing that each locality and each state needs. So NTIA is to that end and influencing the next stage. NTIA is about to come out with their guidance. You've already had that. One, do you think that you can be a helpful influence with NTIA? I know that y'all are probably talking and coordinating. Talk a little bit about how Treasury and NTIA and the Biden administration across all of its different agencies and departments are working together to both speed deployment and set the guidance that you think best closes the digital divide.
Sure. Well, I'll throw a little nugget in, and then I'll answer the larger question. The nugget is, I have read the NOFO from NTIA because there is a process in which other agencies get to comment on it. So we already have given our comments and discussed it with NTIA, but I'm sworn to secrecy about what's in there. People talk a lot about coordination. Oh, there's lots of coordination, and that, like, it's real. There is a real commitment from Treasury, from Commerce, from FCC, from Ag, and from the White House to really make sure that we're coordinating our broadband policy. That is real. And that not only extends to larger meetings that we all get together with the White House, which is actually my 3 o'clock today, that's hosted by NEC, actually Parad, who's the deputy at NEC, and Alan Davidson, obviously, who's NTIA administrator, chair of this group. That's my next meeting. So it's not just, this is not just lip service, like we actually are meeting, but it's more than just the formal meetings. We meet informally with, formally on the schedule, but we have informal chats with NTIA every other week where we trade notes, I talk to NTIA staff all the time. I was just texting with someone in Sam and Ramondo's office before I got on this call. We talk to the FCC all the time. There really is an effort at play here, an awareness that we're not going to get a second chance. You and I have talked about this. Yeah. It's not like Congress is going to come around later this year or next year or anytime in the next foreseeable future and saying, here's another 50, 60 billion, excuse me. Yeah. Like, this is it. This is our chance. The final piece I'll say is there is a real effort right now and a very tangible effort to make sure that we're coordinating on the data we're getting back. Right, so we're going to get data on location served. So is NTIA. As you and I both know, there's this map, the magical fabric, the map that's going to be created by the FCC and used to determine beat allocations and the rest. Well, we can put aside the fact that it's sad that it's 2022 and we still don't have an accurate representation of where there's coverage throughout the country. That's a conversation for another webinar, but we're going to have one. And Treasury and all agencies want to make sure that all the data they're collecting can easily be fed up into this. So we've had so many conversations with the FCC and NTA about exactly what are the elements that we're going to require states to report to us. And then what is the exact format in which we get that information so that it can in fact be fed up into this fabric. We don't want to have a situation, I said this when we started, we don't have a square peg into a round hole moment, right? In 18 months when the FCC and NTA say, or 12 months say, okay, Treasury, where's all your data? And we show them the data and they say, seriously? We can't feed this into our map. Like, I don't want that moment. We want to make sure that what we're collecting is consistent with everybody else.
What can our member companies do to help you get the data and the maps that will feed into this, not only what Treasury is doing, but what's to come next? And to your point, Ag has the Connect America, sure. Treasury, the Capital Projects Fund, NTIA, the infrastructure funding. And the more accurately we can make these critical strategic investments, the better. So what can our members do to help in the data process, the mapping process that would help the country get it right?
Read closely and look closely to all the stuff we put out. I don't think it's very complicated. I think everybody knows what we're going to need, and that's lat and long of locations. It's not complicated. And look, I think, let's just say it this way. Providers have a pretty good sense of their coverage area. And it's frustrating that even though individual providers clearly have a good sense of their coverage area and who's covered, because that's the core of their business. It's frustrating that we're not all able to have this whole picture. And so there's great hope right now that we will accomplish that. So I think stay tuned on the exact details, but I think it behooves all of us, particularly it will behoove competitors to know exactly what that map looks like and where the holes are.
So looking ahead, 6-12 months, what will be your biggest challenges at that point? And what would you hope you could say 6 to 12 months from now?
6 to 12 months, I mean, I want to be able to put a hard hat on and go see construction. Yeah. Right? That's what I expect to see. And I think it's awesome. I think that's very, very, very exciting. And so I don't know. I don't know what the challenge will be in 12 months, but I know what will be exciting in 12 months is that.
As we think about this, and there are great chapters in American history when we have crisis similar to the pandemic, whether it was the Depression, and we decided we're going to bring electricity to every home and business in the midst of the Depression. Post-World War II, we decided that we're going to build an interstate highway system an infrastructure system. Those elements of our infrastructure really led to American leadership and success and growth, and the connectivity of those needs of the country at that time. This is a similar moment for us, and we hope down the road we can all look back and say we met the challenge and we did this successfully, and that the country all looks with a sense of pride and purpose that it was done. I was watching a good PBS series last night, Lewis and Clark, and President Jefferson sends Lewis and Clark to explore the West, and they report back, and they were the front, they were on the frontier, and so you kind of remind me that President Biden has sent you out to be the first to move to explore how we're going to have the infrastructure of the future and the economy of the future. So I wish you the greatest success in the task.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I have to say, this is the first time I've been compared to Lewis and Clark. So I appreciate it.
Well, we all have our different analogies. So we have some audience questions.
Great.
And so I'd love to be able to get to that with the time we have remaining. Let me see if I can actually read what the questions are, or I might have someone from my staff help me here, that we can read to you and to the audience the questions. I don't see it appearing on my stage. Okay, here we go. First one. Do state applications have to list specific projects, or just a plan that includes building symmetric, offer the ACP part of the project, and a competitive grant process? So I believe the question is, how specific does a plan have to be to meet your guidance and your criteria?
It's the latter. It's the latter. We don't need to see you're planning to build out an X city or that city. We just want to see that exactly as you described, the speeds, the affordability, what's the process going to look like, and then it's for the states to run. And in some cases, some states already have competitive broadband grant programs, and it's okay. And in fact, is the plan in many states to feed our money right into the existing infrastructure, the existing application infrastructure, so they could pump out much more grants and connect more.
This is kind of an amazing thing. When you said flexibility, you meant it.
Yeah.
Washington is actually wanting the states to be flexible and innovative.
That's right.
So second question, could you elaborate on what will happen at state levels upon receiving funding? And if you could give any examples.
So I think what the question is asking is, once we've approved a plan for a state, they can get to work. Now, it's not as if the Treasury Department, Mississippi's allocate, I should have looked this up, but let's say it's $150 million. That's a rough guess. It's not as if Treasury just cuts the state a check for $150 million. Obviously, the Treasury Department would never do such a thing, right? They'll pay the state back, as costs are incurred. But the state is free to move and free to work, and they will draw down their funds, as needed. But what I've learned at Treasury, one of the many things I've learned at Treasury is Treasury gets to keep the money in their own interest-bearing accounts. So they don't just give the whole check away to states for them to earn interest on. We dole it out as costs are incurred and as needed.
And the next question, and this is kind of how to best achieve your symmetrical and your speed guidance.
Sure.
And do you believe it will be possible to combine both fiber, fixed wireless, satellite, other wireless type services to meet those criteria? Is that?
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate the question, and in fact, I wanted to say this earlier, and then we moved on to another topic. 100 symmetrical is the goal, but it explicitly says in our guidance that if it's not practicable because of geography, topography, excessive costs, states are allowed to award to providers that will only build out to 120, assuming it's one day scalable to 100 symmetrical. So do I think the majority, hopefully the vast majority of funds will be spent on fiber? Yes, I don't know, hope, I expect. But you can look at a map of the country and you could see there are certain places, for the reasons I just described, where fiber might not make sense, particularly because of excessive costs. Yeah. And in that case, other technologies can play a role.
That's very helpful, and I'm glad we had a chance to fully elaborate on that. Let me see if I have any other questions. One is all right. I think that's pretty much. I think we've covered the waterfront, the fiber front, and the communications front. And I really appreciate your time. I'm thankful that someone with your background from the Hill and knowledge has gone to the administration to help lead a historic effort. And we look forward to working with you to make sure that it is successful and that the priorities and objectives and the opportunity is not missed.
Thank you. Thank you for, first of all, thanks for hosting this again. And, you know, I'd only close by, well, two things. One, by reiterating what you said earlier to all your members of, it's on all of us. It's on your members too, to be advocating, to be out there. This is an historic moment in which it's going to take your advocacy to help get us to the place that we want to get to. Yeah. Ubiquitous, affordable, reliable, high-speed internet for all. And so listen to your leader, listen to Chip. That is excellent advice. The only other thing I would say is stay tuned. We've got very exciting announcements that are coming from Treasury. And my hope is that they create momentum and we can help lift them up and create examples and templates for other states to follow. Of, yep, that's how I want to spend my money. I'm going to deploy the money now and connect those that really need it. So thank you.
Well, Joey, thank you. And to our members, you know, the great news is you don't have to go to Washington now to advocate for your local, exactly. your community and for your state to really have a tremendous level of investment into the infrastructure of the future broadband. Joey, thank you for your leadership, and we look forward to working with you all the way through this process. And enjoy.
Thank you.